Indeed, breaking news straight from Washington. The Supreme Court of the United States has completely overturned Donald Trump's tariffs, declaring them illegal and accusing Trump of exceeding presidential authority. This has become a historic blow to the economic program of Donald Trump's administration, and as experts assure, this decision could lead to a potentially chaotic process of refunding money, as a result of which billions of dollars may be returned to businesses that paid tariffs now considered illegal by the United States Supreme Court. Another problem is how this decision might affect the existing trade agreement. The tariffs imposed under Donald Trump's policy played a role in advancing trade deals worth trillions of dollars, including agreements with China, the United Kingdom, and Japan. But now, won't the parties demand its revision? However, the justices of the United States Supreme Court refuse to take responsibility for such issues and have only ruled that the tariffs are illegal and that the United States president exceeded his authority. I suggest we discuss this topic in detail right now. My name is Alexei Pecci. Let's discuss this topic together. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, like the video, and leave your comment below. Also, subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pecci News. The link to it is in the description of this video. So, today, on Friday, the United States Supreme Court has cancelled the large-scale tariffs imposed by President Donald Trump, which is a significant rejection of a key element of Trump's economic program. The decision, made by a majority vote of 6-3, is a rare case where the conservative-led Supreme Court limits Donald Trump's broad use of executive power. Chief Justice John Roberts and Justices Amy Coney Barrett and Neil Gorsuch joined the three liberals in the majority. But this means that even the conservative justices voted against the tariffs. And now I'll quote Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court John Roberts. President Trump claims that he has emergency powers and can unilaterally impose tariffs of unlimited size, duration, and scope. In light of the broad historical and constitutional context of these claimed powers, he must point to clear authorization from Congress to exercise them. The 1977 law that Trump cited to justify the import tariffs does not meet the requirement of congressional approval necessary for its adoption. What does all this mean? This decision by the United States Supreme Court overturns the 10% tariff imposed by Trump against almost every country in the world. As well as separate higher tariffs on some of the largest United States trading partners, including Canada, Mexico, China, the European Union, Japan, South Korea, and more. Although it should be acknowledged here that some of these countries have signed a trade agreement with the United States, and before the Supreme Court's decision was made, they stated that they would continue to honor these agreements regardless of any court ruling. Why is this important? Well, as Politico writes today, this is because the victory of the 12 Democrat-led states and small businesses that challenged Trump's tariffs is expected to be short-lived. The White House has indicated that it will try to use other powers to keep similar tariffs in place. So, the Supreme Court's decision is temporary, and Trump will clearly find a loophole that will allow him to keep the tariffs. Then the Democrats will challenge this decision in court again, the court will once again rule these tariffs illegal, and Trump will find another loophole, and so on, endlessly. United States Trade Representative Jameson Greer said back in December last year, quote, "Listen, we've been thinking about this plan for 5 years or even longer. You can be sure that when we approached the president at the beginning of his term, we had many different options. My message is this: tariffs will be part of the political system in the future despite the court's decision. But if that's the case, it's worth remembering the words of Donald Trump himself. Because he has repeatedly stated that losing the tariff case in the Supreme Court would be a disaster for the United States. Although critics of his restrictive import tariff scheme argue that the country has actually thrived for decades with low tariffs. So the question is, who is right? Nevertheless, the Supreme Court's decision undermines Donald Trump's ability to impose tariffs at will to resolve geopolitical conflicts. For example, the threat to impose tariffs on countries doing business with Iran. And now Trump won't be able to threaten tariffs when trying to gain a more advantageous negotiating position, for example, his threats to impose tariffs in an attempt to seize Greenland. Businesses condemned these threats of tariffs under the pretext of national security for fueling economic uncertainty, but the Trump administration stated that they were necessary to achieve his political goals. So they were basically saying, listen, yes, we understand this is about trade, but for Trump to achieve his political goals, tariffs need to be imposed. But it's also important to note here that after the decision was made, the Supreme Court was not unanimous. 6 justices who voted to overturn the tariffs agreed that the law Trump referred to, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, cannot be interpreted as allowing the imposition of tariffs at all. Roberts, Gorsuch, and Barrett also relied on a legal theory called the Major Questions Doctrine, to conclude that, because of the broad economic impact of tariffs, Congress would need to be extremely clear in expressing its position before delegating its trade authority to the president. There's a hint here that Congress could, in principle, make this legal by voting to allow Trump to make such decisions himself. Chief Justices Roberts, Gorsuch, and Barrett also rejected the arguments of Trump and the justices who expressed a special opinion that the court should show deference to Donald Trump because of the role that tariffs play in foreign relations. So 3 justices were saying, listen, okay, fine, this is illegal, but let's turn a blind eye to it because it helps in foreign policy. Roberts stated, quote, so that nothing is said about other powers affecting foreign policy. We do not expect Congress to give up its authority to impose tariffs through vague wording or without carefully considered limitations. And Trump in turn continues to insist that his tariffs have caused American industry to simply boom and take off. Quote, tariffs are the best thing that has happened to this country. We're making a fortune. But more importantly, all these factories are now thriving, whereas before they were all abandoned. But there's an interesting point here. The United States federal government may now be forced to pay billions of dollars in compensation to companies that paid tariffs, which the Supreme Court has ruled illegal. Many companies, I should note, have already filed lawsuits to protect their right to compensation in case the court overturns Trump's tariffs, meaning the lawsuits were already prepared. Although regarding the return of the money, Judge Brad Kavanaugh was so vague that it's completely unclear whether the money will be returned or not. What should we do about this and how should we even react? Next, I'll give you his quote, and you try to figure out what he meant. The United States may have to return billions of dollars to importers who paid the tariffs, even though some importers may have already passed those costs on to consumers or other parties. The refund process will probably be a mess. Period. That's the judge's entire explanation. But this is a decision of the United States Supreme Court. It also raises questions about the future of trade agreements made by the Trump administration with the European Union, Japan, South Korea, and other trading partners, with the aim of reducing the tariffs that he himself imposed on their exports to the United States. In short, a year, even a little more than a year of completely unchecked policies by Donald Trump has come to an end, and now the courts will begin to significantly restrict the powers of the United States president. But to be fair, Trump managed to brazenly pursue his own policies for a whole year, just the way he wanted, completely disregarding the law. And, as you noticed, no one could do anything about it. Yes, now the time has come when many of his decisions will be reversed, but nevertheless, for a year, he managed to run the country and foreign policy exactly like that. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinion and conclusions in the comments below this episode, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. If you found this episode interesting and useful, you can support the work of this YouTube channel financially with your donation or a paid subscription using the links and details in the description of this video. I would be grateful for any support from you. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.